Hey, what's up guys? Commander Alex here, and today we're going to be talking about 5 heroes who I believe are actually incredibly good in low elo. Now before we get into the video, I do want to say that this is not a rant on how bad low elo players are. Obviously there's plenty of good low elo players that just are stuck with bad teammates. But I do want to kind of tell you guys that I'm going to be making a lot of assumptions and generalizations, and I feel like it's fair because while some of the low elo players are very good, the majority of them have a lot of issues, and those need to be taken into account when choosing champions for them. So first off, let's get into our first champion here. We have Finn. Now Finn, I think, is kind of one of those champions that obviously he is a support, but the damage on him really makes him a good low elo champion for carrying. So first off, he has really good late game scaling, like incredibly good late game scaling. And the reason that's important is because in low elo, players tend to not have really good ideas of how to push their advantages, and that tends to lean towards longer games. So with Finn, you have this champion who can absolutely destroy as the games go to 20, even 25 minutes. As far as ease of use with Finn, he's pretty easy to use. He's not as easy as some of the other heroes on this list because he does have some skill shots, but the nice thing about him is that he doesn't really have a lot of info you have to learn with him. His ult is just a hook. His B is just a jump that heals and kind of like gives your allies cool effects. And his A is just a stun where you whack people in front of you. Like, none of the things that he does is very complicated. In game, they're kind of hard to pull off at times, but when it comes to just understanding the character, he's pretty easy. And then finally, and this is probably the biggest thing with him, he's a support that can actually deal damage and take out enemy heroes. And this is really important because if any of the heroes on this list don't have the damage to take out one, if not two enemy heroes at once, they're not going to be on this list because if you can't kill an enemy hero, you can't carry. That's just the straight truth. And Finn, while he is a support, he actually has the base damage to carry, which I think is really cool, and that's the reason why he's the only support on this list. Alright, so moving on here, we have a champion who you guys probably thought was going to be higher, but that's Ringo. Now Ringo is one of those champions that obviously is getting a lot of play in high elo because he can pull off some amazing damage if you know exactly what you're doing with him. But you don't need to know exactly what you're doing with him to get pretty good damage out of him and really just play him at an average level. He's really easy to pick up, and that's why his ease of use scores really high with me. That being said, his 1v3 capabilities, if you're not ahead, are pretty limited because he has practically no AoE damage. So he does kind of fall short in that regard. As far as late game scaling, he can scale well into the late game, but the one issue with him is that if he doesn't get ahead or at least stay even, he is going to fall off into the late game compared to some other hyper carries like Saw. So speaking of Saw, he is our third champion. A lot of you probably thought Saw was going to be the best champion on this list. He was going to be number 5, the final champion, but no, I don't really think he is that good. And the reason is pretty simple. Saw is one of those champions that checks all the boxes. In low elo, he can scale really well into the late game because people don't counterbuild him. In low elo, he can 1v2 and 1v3 because people don't counterbuild him. And in low elo, he's super easy to use because you don't even really need to know how to stutter step to use him against people who aren't stutter stepping against you. So he checks all the boxes. But he really doesn't when you look at him in game. Yes, he can push turrets super hard, but without a team to back him up, he actually dies really easily. And if the enemy team even kind of figures that out partially, you're probably going to be screwed because in low elo, supports kind of don't really support. Some of them do. I will admit that. There are some very good supports in low elo, but there's also a lot of supports that build full CP or, take on an Ozo support. And when you have stuff like that, you're probably not going to survive this Saw, and that's why he ranks really low on this list, because even though he has all of the boxes checked, he really just doesn't have the ability to 1v3 without at least a little bit of support from his team, and that's what I think makes him really hard to play, especially in solo queue. So moving on here, we're going to go to a champion that I'm guessing a lot of you didn't think was going to be on this list, and that's Rona. Rona's one of those champions that people don't even really seem to think about, like they just overlook her all the time, but she's really good in my opinion, especially in low elo. So as far as late game scaling, if you go for a late game belt on her, she does scale fairly well into the late game. Ease of use is kind of a mixed bag. Her abilities can be kind of difficult. She has a leap that also deals like a slow AoE, and then she also has a double tap on her B ability and stuff like that. But if you're playing her in low elo, you don't really need any of that. All you really need to know is that you jump on top of the enemy team squishy, and you press your ult, and then they die. That's all you really need to know, and that's what I think is important about her. While to play her at a really effective level, you kind of need a lot of skill. To play her at an effectiveness level to get you out of low elo, you really don't need to know much more than jump on the squishy person and press your ult. That's really all you need to know. So ease of use scores pretty high for me. And then finally, we have the 1v3 capabilities, which is pretty much off the charts. I'm guessing she's probably the best hero on this list for 1v3ing because she has her ult, which makes her really, really hard to kill. If you have a Serpent's Mask, heals you, and then also does a bunch of AoE damage. So it's pretty much like the best ability in the game if you're going to try and 1v3 an enemy team, which you're probably going to have to at some point if you're going to want to be pulling off these hard carry low elo games. So there you have it. We have the first 4 heroes out of the way. Now, who do I think is the single best low elo hero? Well, I think it's Cruel. Honestly, I think it's Cruel, and the reason for this is pretty simple. Cruel is he's really, really good, especially when you don't know what you're doing against him. And that's what most low elo players are going to have happen. If you have a team that knows what they're doing and they build Aegis, or rather if they build Atlas and then they kite away from you and they, set up really great burst damage onto you to get you out of the fight immediately, you're not going to have a good game. You're probably going to get destroyed. And that's why he's not as good in high elo, though he has been getting a little bit of play lately. The real reason is that low elo players don't tend to know any of this. They don't know to build Atlas. They don't know to burst him out. They don't know to kite him out. Like, these are just foreign and abstract ideas to them that a lot of times end up allowing Cruel to get these crazy, crazy triple kills. So let's look at his late game. It's probably the best in the game. Obviously, it got a little bit of nerf in the recent patches, but his mid game makes up for it, and honestly, he's still really, really good in the late game, so I wouldn't worry about it. When it comes to his ease of use, he does have a little bit of a tricky kind of ult where he scales the stun duration with the distance, and his smite can be kind of hard to understand, I suppose, but he's really, really easy, to be quite honest with you. And then 1v3 capabilities, while he doesn't have any AoE damage, he does have really, really good tankiness, really, really good lifesteal, and kind of just that 1v3-ness. I guess you can call it an X factor, but basically he can walk into a 3-man enemy team, and just kill them all. I don't know how it happens, but he has the damage and he has that tankiness and that barrier to keep him alive through everything and actually just one by one take out every single person on the enemy team. And I think that's what really makes him the best in low elo, because if you don't know what you're doing against him, he's going to wreck you. Anyways, that's all I got for you guys today, and I hope you guys enjoyed the video, and I'll talk to you guys in the next one. See ya!